So when we look at this, when we look at what we do with exercise, normally when we exercise, we use it to control our weight to be healthier, right? But what we've seen over the past number of years is that exercise really can be the means for controlling how we age. And as a young 20-something, I was 26 years old when I started working in fitness full time. And I went through the certification process. I got my personal training certification. I got my indoor cycling certification. And they tell you, if you're doing this, you're doing heart rate training, you got to take 220 minus age, and you have to come up there with their estimated max heart rate. How many people have done the 220 minus age? And what have you noticed about the max heart rate? It's not really that hard, is it? When they did that research more than 50 years ago on college students. That's one of the things, when you look at research about exercise science research, always take it with a grain of salt, because who do you think most of the research subjects are? College students, because that's where they get the population for the studies, right? So we can get some data from people in their 20s, but it might not necessarily correlate. But what I started noticing back in the late 90s as a young personal trainer and cycling instructor is I would do the max heart rate for somebody, and they would say, Pete, I barely feel like I'm working at that intensity. That's when I started realizing that what we know about fitness and as we age might be incomplete. Another thing that turned me on to maybe we don't know enough about this, how many people know the sport of rugby? If you've watched rugby, seen it played, in my early 20s, I graduated from college in the early 1990s, in my early 20s. I wanted a way to stay active and stay fit, so I joined a local rugby club. Here I was, 22 years old, and I got my butt kicked by guys almost twice my age. They're in their late 30s and early 40s, and at the time, this was 30 years ago. At the time, I go, wow, these guys are really old. Are you sure it's okay for you to be out here playing rugby when you're this old? You know, you get that mentality. But again, what I realized was these guys were in their late 30s, early 40s. They were still running around extremely fit and extremely good shape. That's when, at that time, at 22 years old, I made up my mind that I wanted to be in the same shape they were when I got to my 40s. And so between those two things, between watching people come in and seeing the heart rate numbers be a little bit off, and then seeing these people playing a recreational sport at an age when most people retire from professional sports, got me thinking and paying attention that maybe what we know about exercise and how we age is incomplete. And so years later, when I started working, my journey took me on an education route where I started training other personal trainers, and I moved out to San Diego in 2008 to work for the American Council on Exercise. That's one of the largest certification organizations, in the world. And so I came out here to develop education programs for personal training. What was the big trend in the late 2000s? What was happening in fitness in the late 2000s, like 2009, 2010? Anybody remember? What's that? Tybo was a little bit earlier. Aerobics, CrossFit. CrossFit in the mid to late 2000s, about 06 to about 2010 and a little bit beyond, CrossFit blew up. And CrossFit is based on high intensity exercise. So being an organization that educates personal trainers, with CrossFit, a high intensity workout program, becoming super popular, I was tasked with doing some research on high intensity exercise to develop some education programs on it to help personal trainers learn how to apply it correctly. And when I started learning about high intensity exercise, ultimately became my book that came out in 2021, Ageless Intensity, How High Intensity Workouts Slow the Aging Process. So what you're going to get today, what we're going to cover, sorry about the delay, but what we're going to talk about today is how exercise promotes longevity. You're going to walk out of here knowing the type of exercise that you should be doing. If you want to take control of how the passage of time affects your body. Now, can you do exercise? Will walking give you better health? Absolutely. But walking is not nearly as powerful as other forms of exercise in slowing down the effects of time. And then finally, one of the last things I have in here is I have a recommended program for the week. That way, while you're here for the rest of the week, you can start developing the habits that you need to build so that when you go back to the world and go back to your regular schedule, you know what you can be doing all week long. You know the types of exercise. You know a schedule that you can create for yourself that now, hey, I only need to work out really hard 2 or 3 days a week. I only need to be out of breath 2 or 3 days a week. But I need to move every day of the week. And I need to be mindful about what I eat every day of the week. And finally, if we want to really work on our longevity, what's one thing that we can really practice while we're here? There's a lot of things we can practice while we're here, but one thing we can really practice is we try to get to sleep a little bit earlier, right? We can try to get a little bit better sleep. Because what we're seeing too, that sleep has a huge role. in our health and how we age. I saw a great thing that came out, got published, I think in 2020 during the pandemic. They did one of those large population studies in England, in the United Kingdom, where they look at a large group of people and they follow them for a number of years. And what they did was they found that people in their 60s that averaged 6 hours of sleep or less a night between their 40s and their 60s were at a much higher chance of developing cognitive decline as they age. So I'll say that again. In this large population study, what they found was that between the ages of mid-40s and mid-60s, people who slept less than 6 hours a night were at a much higher risk of having cognitive decline as they age. So that's one thing. So while you're here at the ranch, while you're here at the ranch, you can start working on habits that you can take with you back to the real world. So that's why I'm pointing that out. So those are the 3 books that I've written. Smarter Workouts will teach you about designing your own exercise programs. This is what we're going in today, how exercise can control aging. And then I wrote about how we can recover, what we can do to speed up the recovery process from exercise. Now, one of the things I love about coming here is this spa has helped put fitness on the map. This spa has really helped make commercial fitness a thing. Because looking around the room, how many people know who this is? And who is she?
Jane Fonda. Or is it?
It's the other one.
Judy Shepherd-Bissett.
Bingo! Judy Shepherd-Bissett and Jazzercise. But the reason why this is up here is what is one of the big trends in fitness right now? We talked about CrossFit, but one of the big trends, if we don't go to a health club, we go to where to work out? We go to like a studio, right? We go to like a boutique studio, like for bar. Jazzercise was the first boutique studio concept. If you look back a little bit more than 50 years ago, and what she said when I interviewed her, I used to do a podcast, and when I interviewed Judy for my podcast, like, how'd you get started teaching Jazzercise? She said she was a dance instructor, and she realized that people were coming to her dance class just to take dance classes to get in shape. And literally that was how simple it was. So she said, hey, I'm gonna stop teaching dance for dance, and I'm gonna start teaching dance for exercise. And she created the first instructor training program. I moved out here to work for one of the certification organizations. What I do now is a direct result of what Judy created back in the 1970s. Who's this fellow? Arnold, our former governor. That's the whole reason I wanted to move to California, was have Arnold as my governor. But what did he do? What happened in about 1976, I think is when it came out. What movie came out? Pumping Iron. Pumping Iron was a movie about Arnold Schwarzenegger training for Mr. Olympia, one of the big bodybuilding competitions. Pumping Iron came out in 1976. Jazzercise was popular in the early 1970s. When was Nautilus released? When was Nautilus introduced? 1970. So Nautilus strength training machines were introduced in 1970. They made strength training accessible. What was the other thing that happened in the 1970s that made fitness blow up in popularity? Out of Texas, the Cooper Clinic and aerobics. Where I'm going with this is in the 1970s, we had all these things. We had Nautilus, we had Judy Shepherd-Bissett, we had Jazzercise, we had Dr. Cooper talking about the benefit of aerobic exercise. We had Richard Simmons, Jane Fonda. Before the 1970s, who was talking about exercise?
Jack LaLanne.
Maybe only Jack LaLanne. So it wasn't until the 1970s that recreational fitness became a thing. Think about it, before the 1970s, in 1964, if you went out for a jog, for those of you that can remember 1964, if you went out and started running around the neighborhood in 1964, what would your neighbors have thought? They would have thought you were crazy. What are you doing? Why are you running down the street? Is your house on fire? What's happening? Right? Because we didn't do that.
In women's sports, a lot of times high schools didn't have
They weren't a thing. 1972 is when Title IX was passed.
Her uterus would fall out.
Yeah, and here's the thing. In the 1970s and the 1980s, even in the 1980s, they told professional athletes not to strength train. In the 1970s and 1980s, here in the United States, we told professional athletes not to strength train. I am 100% serious. Kids in high school right now are getting better strength and conditioning programs than NFL players did in the 1980s. Kids in high school right now have access to better strength and conditioning than NFL players, than professional athletes did in the 1980s. We understand so much more now. And one of the things that we understand, and where I'm going with this is, for those of you that were alive in the 1970s, you guys are alive in a time when we now understand that exercise really extends the lifespan, the health span. Because before this, we didn't understand that. But now that you are in your 70s, 80s, and beyond, we have 50 to 60 years of data to look at and say, hey, how has exercise affected how we age? That's fascinating right now. Because what we're seeing, I'm sure you see this anecdotally when you go to the gym, you see people that are in great shape. I put these pictures up here. 51 years old in this picture, 50 years old in this picture, 52 years old in this picture. Gen X, we are doing our 50s differently than every other generation. The thing is, what we have found about exercise and aging is that if you maintain your fitness, you can still do your favorite activities throughout your lifespan. Now, when I tell somebody who's 52 years old to start doing inverts, to start learning inverted handstands on a half pipe, probably not. You don't want to start in your 50s, but if you've been skating since your teens, can you do it in your 50s? Absolutely. And that's the one thing that exercise does. If nothing else, when you leave here this week, I want you to think about fitness this way. Fitness is having the ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Think about that. Fitness is having the ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it. In other words, fitness is freedom. When you're fit, you have the freedom to go out and enjoy life, right? How powerful is that? You want to go on a hike, you can do it. You want to go for a swim, you can do it. You want to go for a bike ride, you can do it. You have the freedom to do things. That is what I advocate for. I don't care about weight loss. I am one of those few personal trainers who do not care about six-pack abs. Frankly, we all have a six-pack. Some of us just keep it in a cooler. So that's a whole other conversation. Muscles function. I'm more interested in how muscles work. I don't care how muscles look. Frankly, that's where my interest is. So aging affects all these things in our body, our skeletal system, our nervous system, our immune system, our balance, our timing, our muscular. What's the endocrine system do? That produces our hormones. How many people go into the gym on a Monday saying, today's my hormone day? Probably not that many people. But hormones are chemicals that control how every tissue, how every cell in our body functions. One of the most powerful things about high intensity exercise is it changes your hormone profile. It's the hormones it produces. So that really is the difference between moderate intensity. Going for a walk is great. You'll burn a few calories. You'll flow oxygen through your body. That's great. You'll get a benefit from that. However, if you do a 15-minute high-intensity interval training class, your body's going to have a much better response in terms of growth hormone and something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor is a protein that promotes the growth of new brain cells. So going for a walk, burn a few calories, get some oxygen flowing, good stuff. Going for a high-intensity interval workout, you're going to get a much different response. You get a much different biochemical response. Now the difference is you can walk every day of the week because it's not that much stress on the body. However, how many times a week should we do a high-intensity exercise, a high-intensity workout? 2, maybe 3 times a week because of the amount of stress on the body. And as Americans, that's where we get off the rails, right? Because if I say high-intensity exercise is good for you, what do we tend to do in America? Let's do it every day. We're going to do it for 2 hours a day, every day. No. 5 to 10 minutes is all you need 2 or 3 times a week. If you do high-intensity exercise the right way, where you're huffing and puffing, hands on your knees, 5 to 10 minutes of true workout is all you need 2 or 3 times a week. That's what the data shows. That's what the research shows. You can exercise for a higher intensity longer, but you really thrash the system. So why on earth would you do that? The data shows that a good 5, now it doesn't mean you only do 5 minutes. You have to get warmed up when you do that 5 minutes, but doing a 5-minute round of like 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off for 5 minutes will be enough to get a significant result. So this is how your body changes. These are all the things that change in your body in exercise. Our goal, now here's the thing. Most of the time when it comes to exercise, we talk about SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant. What's that last? What's T stand for in SMART goals? Time bound, right? So if we're talking about training for longevity, do we want to put a date on the end of it? Think about that for a second, right? I don't want to sit there, because if I'm training for a marathon, I know the marathon's going to start, but they had the Tecate Marathon out here, right? Today's what, October 13th? If I'm training for a marathon on October 13th, I know I need to peak my fitness for October 13th. But if we're training for longevity, do you want to peak your fitness for an end date? No. Think about that. No, you don't. You want that date to go as long as possible. So, you can have a goal to train for longevity, but we need to make an adjustment to the goals. There is no end date. There is no achieve this goal by. This is a daily goal. What are you doing today? What activity are you going to do today? What nutrition are you going to do today? What meditation are you going to do today? Our goal is successful aging. You lower the risk of disease and disability. Engage with life. Maintain cognitive function. What is similar between these two people right here?
Their age.
Their age. In this picture, and I know it's a little blurry picture, but in Cocoon, Wilford Brimley was 49 years old when he filmed Cocoon. Wilford Brimley was 49 years old when he filmed Cocoon. I'm 52. I think I look a little bit younger than Wilford did in that video. That's Paul Rudd at age 50. The thing is, we know now that exercise keeps us young. One of the reasons why we look so much young now is that the high intensity exercise produces growth hormone. Growth hormone helps the skin look young. So if we're doing nothing else in our 50s, 60s, 70s, we should be doing a little bit of high intensity exercise because it helps change that endocrine profile. So for 400 years, the human lifespan was about 50 years old. We'd all be playing in overtime right now if we went back on this. But what happened in the early 1900s? We started inoculating people, we understood vaccines, we started having people wash their hands, we had doctors wash their hands. Whoa, imagine that! I'm gonna check up on somebody, I'm gonna wash my hands beforehand, but think about all the public health. So in 2019 now, women live to about 80 years old, men live to 78. I gotta update this because we're not 2024. But really what we've done is we've changed our public health. So in 1970s on, as I mentioned, we started exercising as a recreational pastime. In 2018, Ball State has one of the top exercise physiology laboratories in the country. In 2018, Ball State published a study that they had four groups of people in the study. One group of people was 20-year-olds. The 20-year-olds were the control group. They did muscle biopsies on the 20-year-olds because they wanted to see what the 20-year-old muscle tissue looked like. Now the other three groups were 70-year-olds. One group of 70-year-olds did not exercise. One group of 70-year-olds exercised on a regular basis, 2 or 3 times a week, like going to the YMCA, doing a little workout, probably like a lot of us do, right? The other group of 70-year-olds were recreational athletes, marathons, cycling, triathlons. So these two groups of 70-year-olds have been exercising throughout their life for 50 years. This group of 70-year-olds hadn't. The fascinating thing was their muscle biopsies, when they looked at their muscle tissue under the microscope, these two groups of 70-year-olds had muscle tissue that was very similar to the group of the 20-year-olds. Enzyme count, mitochondrial count, in terms of overall structure, architectural density, the 70-year-old muscle tissue looked like 70-year-old muscle tissue. The 70-year-olds that have been working out their entire lifespan, their muscle tissue looked like muscle tissue that had been preserved in time for 50 years. That is fascinating. We're going to start seeing a lot more of those type of studies being published because people that have been exercising throughout their lifespan, their muscles have been preserved and helping maintain and preserve. So this is a great study, and one of the things that they published was when you increase your aerobic capacity, you literally extend your lifespan. METs are how we measure aerobic capacity. So when we look at exercise, let's talk about the modes of exercise. One mode of exercise is cardio, what scientists call, if you're an exercise scientist, you call it metabolic conditioning. Because you have 3 different ways you produce energy. 1, you produce energy with fat and oxygen. 2, you produce energy with carbohydrate, either with or without oxygen. And 3, you produce energy from the chemical ATP, adenosine triphosphate, stored in your muscle cells. Those are the 3 energy paths. So when if I have you go for a walk, you're using your aerobic mitochondrial energy path. If I have you do a sprint for 10 seconds, you're using your ATP energy pathway. So when exercise scientists, when we look at an exercise program, we always talk about which energy pathways are working. Is it working aerobic or is it working anaerobic? Again, 2 or 3 times a week, we want to be doing anaerobic interval training because of carbohydrate metabolism. Anytime you work anaerobic, that means your body's metabolizing carbohydrate for fuel. When you're working that hard, you're metabolizing carbohydrate, think in the back of your mind is, I am making my body diabetes proof. I am making my body, I'm going to increase my insulin sensitivity so that my body can better process the carbohydrates that I eat. That's the main thing that we're looking at. So cardio training is really we're producing energy with or without oxygen, right? And when we look at this, as we age, our intake without exercise, we lose up to 10% of our oxygen consumption per decade. If we don't exercise, we lose up to 10% of our oxygen consumption per decade. We can lose our max heart rate, we can lose our cardiac output. That's why when they extrapolated 220 minus age, they kind of guessed at how the heart would be affected as they age. They literally guessed that. That's why now, if we do exercise testing, we don't use 220 minus age, we use how you metabolize carbohydrate, right? We measure you, we can either measure you with a mask, or has anybody ever done the talk test? When you can talk comfortably during exercise, you're burning fat for fuel. Now, if I'm exercising where I can only, now you're burning primarily carbohydrate because you have to push out carbon dioxide at a much faster rate. So when you're out working out, if you can talk comfortably, great, you're burning fat. But if you have to gasp for air, you can only say 1 or 2 words at a time, you're in anaerobic glycolysis. You can throw that down to your friends next time you're working out with them. Say, hey, we're in anaerobic glycolysis right now. What'd you call me? But just that way you know there's something to it. But when we do cardio training, the thing that we want to do, this is where walking in like long, slow distance cardio does have a benefit. See, the mistake we make, and we make this mistake all the time as exercise people, we say, hey, high intensity exercise is good. Okay, I'm going to do all high intensity exercise. But then what do we forget to do? We forget to walk. Because walking is good. Okay, well, all I'm going to do is walk. No, we still need to do strength training. Well, I'm going to do is strength. Did anybody ever feel like that? You hear that something is good, everything, I will give you a bit of news, it all works. It all works. And here's the thing, this is going to make you so frustrated, you should be doing all of it. Not all at the same time, but can you focus on Pilates for a few months? Absolutely. And then maybe focus on yoga for a few months. Then maybe focus on bar for a few months. And then come back to Pilates. What's that going to do? It's going to put different stress into the system. It's going to put different inputs into the system. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to do the same thing all the time because the body gets used to that. So this is our cardio training. We need to do this because the heart is a pump. Regular exercise makes that heart more efficient. Mobility training, flexibility, we control joint range of motion. We control how the tissues move. We have 2 primary types of tissue, muscle tissue. We have the contractile element, which responds to strength training by becoming stronger, capable of generating more force. But we have the elastic component, the fascia. This is the connective tissue that connects all your muscle fibers to one another. Anybody that ever does yoga, you're training primarily your fascial system. When you do strength training, you're training primarily your muscle tissue, your contractile element, your protein filaments. So that really is mobility, controls joint range of motion, and is great for our tissue. And this gets us to strength training. I think of strength training as force production. If I'm doing max strength, if I'm doing really heavy, I'm trying to generate a lot of force in a relatively short amount of time. Now, if I'm doing endurance, I'm trying to sustain force for an extended period of time. But what muscles do is muscles generate force. Anytime you pick up a weight, you're accelerating their mass. What's the first rule of physics? Inertia. A body at rest stays at rest unless what? Acted on by an outside force. So if my water bottle is at rest, that's not going anywhere until what? Until a muscle contracts to generate a force to move it. Now when a muscle contracts, that's the second rule of physics. F equals mass times acceleration. So when a muscle contracts, it's doing the work, it's expending energy. So that is where the benefit of strength training is. When we do strength training, we expend energy, and the result is we grow more muscle tissue. The body says, hey, this thing is really heavy. I'm going to need more fibers. I'm going to need more cells in order to be able to pick up something heavy like this again. So your brain sends a signal to your body and says, hey, we need more muscle fibers. So there's something called mechanotransduction. Mechanotransduction means mechanical force creates chemical change. Mechanical force creates chemical change. When you lift a heavy weight, your body gets a signal to produce more satellite cells. The satellite cells either become bone cells or they become tissue cells. They can form collagen or they can form muscle fibers. So when you do strength training, your body's producing new cells. They can either become bone, muscle tissue, or connective tissue. That is the power of strength training. You're enhancing your body's own natural recycling plan. So that way when you do strength training, it's not just I'm getting big and buff, forget about that, I don't care about that. It's you're making the muscles capable of generating more force. When your muscles are capable of generating more force, they expend more energy. When you expend more energy, your body processes carbohydrate more efficiently. Does that make sense? So now you guys need to become engineers. We're not just working out, we gotta think about this as an engineering solution. But that's really what we're doing. So muscle, and this gives you an idea. These are the muscle fibers, and around every individual fiber is connective tissue. So like tomorrow I'm doing a class on strength training for longevity. Tomorrow's class is all just about strength training. What we're gonna do is work on the muscle fibers. On Thursday, I think it's Thursday, I'm teaching a class called fascial fitness. That's gonna be for the connective tissue. When we wanna get the muscle fibers stronger, we contract against resistance. When we wanna get our connective tissue stronger, we lengthen under resistance. And this is why, because as we age, we can lose muscle tissue. Guys, hey, women, this is where you get it back a little bit. Over the age of 35, what happens to men? We produce less testosterone, right? So we need to, if we want to maintain normal function, wink wink, if we want to maintain normal function, we need to be strength training. Because strength training produces testosterone. Strength training will elevate. If you add more lean muscle mass, you add more free testosterone to the body. Now here's the thing, for those of us that have excessive abdominal fat, if we have excessive abdominal fat will convert, there's an enzyme called aromatase. Aromatase can convert free testosterone into estradiol, which is a female sex hormone. So if we're looking at having a lot of abdominal fat right here, we need to get rid of that, so that way we can use our free testosterone the way it's designed to be used. But that really, as we get older, we can lose muscle mass, but the beautiful thing is, as we age, we can also add muscle mass. So these are the recommendations for strength training. Recommendations for general strength training are 2 to 3 times a week. 1 to 2 exercises per muscle group, 2 to 3 sets per muscle group, 70 to 85% 1 RM. 1 RM means 1 rep max. Now, if you can do about 12 repetitions, you're doing about 70% of your 1 RM. So if you're doing about 12 repetitions, because what we're finding now with strength training is it's not necessarily the weight, it's going to a point of fatigue. If you want to get the muscles to grow, you need to work to a point of fatigue. So the weight, somewhat as long as you go to a point of fatigue. This is a recommendation for cardio. At least 300 minutes a week up to 300 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise. A minimum of 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity. So between 150 and 300 minutes a week of cardio training, moderate. Between 75 and 150 minutes a week of vigorous training. Those are the recommendations. Those are recommendations for strength training, for cardio training. Now let's define that real quick, and I'm gonna have to jump ahead a little bit just because we got off on time. So these are our intensity. What we're doing right now is you're at about a 1. We use a 1 to 10 scale of perceived exertion. Right now you're at about a 1 right now. Now if you go for a steady hike, did anybody do Alex's Oak this morning? I led Alex's Oak. So on the way up Alex's Oak, I'd probably put that hike at a good 6 or 7. If you're doing Alex's Oak at a good pace where you're breathing hard, you're probably at a good 6 or a 7. And that's where we want to be on 2 or 3 mornings of the week, right? High intensity would be you're taking a class, one of the 20s is yelling at you to work really hard, you can barely breathe. That's high intensity exercise. So while you're here over the course of the week, you can do this every day. You can do this probably 3, maybe 4 times. You should only be doing this 2, maybe 3 times. Does that make sense? That's over the course of this week while you're here.
So,
it's just a general balance.
do you have to do the vigorous also? I mean, you have to do all 3 of these. Is that what you're saying?
The question is, do you have to do vigorous? You don't have to do anything you don't want to do.
I understand
I know,
that,
but
you know what I mean.
but the data shows
We
that
should do.
that high intensity exercise produces different benefits than lower intensity.
Okay.
So if you want the benefits from higher, if you want the growth hormone, it's not just the burning calories, but it's that endocrine response. Then that's where high intensity exercise becomes critical.
That's the harder one for me.
That is the hard
You
one.
can do the other 2.
But and I'll show you 1 or 2 options for that, right? Because
Okay.
it's not, because trust me, I got a bad knee, I got bad shoulders. Like I said, I played rugby for years, so my body's being held together by bubble gum and baling wire at this point. I'm waiting until I can control my body with an app before I go get any surgeries to get anything put back together. But there's our intensity. So every day of the week we can do something here. 3 or 4 times a week we want to be here. 2 or 3 times a week we want to be here. Can we agree on that? Doesn't mean every day you have to be out of breath. We don't want that. This is what I was talking about with brain-derived neurotrophic factor. That produces the growth of new brain cells. VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, produces new capillaries and new vessels in the brain. The data shows that moderate to high intensity exercise. So the data shows if you want the brain boost, we got to be doing exercise here, because exercise that produces lactic acid and hydrogen ions, that's that burning sensation you feel in the muscles. That's correlated with an elevation in GH, growth hormone, and insulin-like growth factor. So when you're uncomfortable, to answer your question, think about it this way: when you're exercising at a point when you're uncomfortable, you're getting more protein for your brain, and you're getting more of the feel-good stuff that for the benefit. And what that does, now the good news is, that's the before and after. Now we can't go underneath the hood of your body, but after about 1 to 2 years of higher intensity training, your body will be producing the right hormones, testosterone, growth hormone, insulin-like growth factor, that literally, theoretically, not literally, but theoretically, you can go from there to there. If you change your endocrine profile, if you start strength training more and get more anabolic and more testosterone, you can change your body like that. So to optimize longevity, we want to be doing strength training for large muscle groups. The deadlift, the squat, the clean, the snatch. We want to involve more muscle mass in the workout. So these exercises produce more testosterone, shorter rest intervals, has a more of a metabolic response, meaning that it creates more disruption in the system. Growth hormone worked about 10 reps, meaning to a point of fatigue. Women respond better to growth hormone. Men have more of a testosterone response. That's because testosterone is produced in the testes. So that's where women do not need to worry about breaking out muscles overnight. Just physiologically, you do not produce the same levels of testosterone, and testosterone is the primary muscle building hormone. Growth hormone metabolizes fat, so as your body elevates levels of growth hormone, that's not a bad thing at all. So I'm gonna go to this, and then now I'll get you out of here. So these are the safer exercises, right? Like I wouldn't necessarily have somebody deadlift, but this is called a hip thrust. It keeps your back straight on a bench, but you put all the work in your glutes and your hamstrings to get all that power. You have a lot of muscle mass right there. So if you can add muscle mass there safely, that's a great way you can easily add muscle mass. Your glutes and hamstrings are primarily type 2 muscle fibers. So as you start doing a safer exercise like this, that's where you can add muscle mass relatively quickly. Now these are the type of exercises for cardio. I don't like running and jumping for people that have knee issues, but rowing machine and like the bikes, there's no ground impact and you're getting more muscle tissue working.
How about the ski?
Ski erg, same thing. Ski erg, anything that you don't have jumping up and down, that is what I recommend. Or those heavy ropes. Heavy ropes, that's one of the reasons why we have them in the circuit, is heavy ropes are great high intensity training. And you're not putting too much stress on the system. So these are all exercises that sprinting on the ground can hurt. Medicine ball throws though are great because you don't have to catch. The risk of injury is in the catching, not in the throwing. The throwing is fine. That's why we have that medicine ball thing set up over there, is you can throw that, and that's explosive training. What we're trying to do is get speed of movement, rapid movement. So this is what's safe-ish. No exercise is 100% safe, so safe-ish. Now this is what a 3-day schedule should look like on a regular day, right? Monday we can do a high-intensity strength training. Tuesday can be more of a body weight workout. That might be a yoga day, it might be a Pilates day. Wednesday I'm now going to do pure cardio, and then we'll start over again on Thursday. Or I can take the day off. But that way, if you follow that schedule, you get 2 strength training workouts a week, 2 body weight workouts a week, and 2 pure cardio workouts a week. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That way it's a relatively balanced schedule, and then you get Sunday, you get 1 day where you can kind of Netflix and chill. You don't have any scheduling. So that's what a regular week might look like back in the real world. Strength training on Monday, yoga on Tuesday, indoor cycling or HIIT class on Wednesday, strength training again on Thursday, yoga on Friday. Saturday, you can go a little bit longer. And I always point out here, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, if you know you have concert tickets on a Friday night, should you make that your hardest workout? No, why not? You're not going to get great sleep, right? So if you're going to a concert on a Friday night, you can do an easy workout that day, but don't do a hard workout. Because you recover when you sleep. If you're not getting good night's sleep, if you're going to have an extra glass or 2 of wine, God bless, go have an extra glass or 2 of wine. But understand it's going to disrupt your quality of sleep, so that's not the day for your highest intensity workout. Does that make sense? Yes. By all means, go on and enjoy, but that's not the day you crush yourself. So activities, you guys are in the perfect place to start working on your longevity. What's the benefit of learning something new? You stimulate your brain, you stimulate the cognitive, right? Learn how to cook something new, learn something new dance, right? Be social. What's one of the things now, what's one of the biggest risk factors as we age? Not just smoking, but what? Isolation. Make some new friends here. We are the perfect environment. This is the perfect environment. Exactly. Come here with your friends and family. But we are the perfect environment for extending the health span, right? Try pickleball, try hiking, take classes, do a lecture like you're doing here. Paint, draw, get back in your creative side. Use the time here this week to tap in to some of your creative, if you haven't had a chance to do that, right? And last one here, because I know we're out of time. Sorry about being a little bit delayed, but this is your schedule for the week. I went through this week's schedule, and I kind of alternate. Tomorrow's a little bit more strength training. Tuesday's a little bit more cardio. Wednesday's, it kind of alternated between strength and cardio. And this is, trust me, I'm not going to go around and say, hey, where are you guys today? I'm not going to check your schedule. But just based on the data, based on the science, what I wanted to do was, hey, according to what we know, this was a recommendation how to get the biggest benefit out of your week. Take some pickleball, learn something new, take a cooking class, do some art, go on a couple of walks, do a hard class that maybe you haven't tried before. Try a kettlebell class if you haven't done it before. Try a TRX, try a ropes class. And then when you go back to your regular schedule, you know what feels good, you know what it feels like, and you know what? It is going to be new the first time you go in that studio. And it is scary to try something new. But if it's going to add a couple years to our life, why not get out there and give it a go? I know I went through that a little bit quickly. I do apologize about the start of the talk, of not having this 100% set up. Any questions on this? Yeah.
Something that I read a bit about lately is doing that isometric, pulling everything in and like squatting against the wall and holding it is
Yeah.
one of the most effective things you could do for.
It can be.
What
So,
would
yeah.
that be called in the big scheme?
I like that. So isometrics, anybody else ever heard of that? Make an arm muscle real quick. Make an arm muscle. You're doing an isometric exercise, right? So an isometric exercise, you're contracting the muscle, but you're not moving it through a range of motion. You're not generating force against anything. So here's the thing about isometric training. It is great for increasing muscle activation, and you can do it to increase muscle tone, but it won't necessarily increase muscle strength. So it doesn't have the same high intensity effect. Now, can you add a little bit of isometric training in to stimulate the muscle activation? Absolutely. Muscle tone, the term muscle tone, tonus, T-O-N-U-S, is a term for state of semi-contraction of the muscle fiber. That's where we get the term muscle tone from. Tonus is a state of semi-contraction of the muscle fiber. Holding an isometric contraction, you're sending more of a nervous system signal to the fibers so it remains in semi-contraction. So isometric training, great for definition, not necessarily beneficial for strength or changing the endocrine profile. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No,
Yeah.
Where does swimming laps fit into your picture?
I love that. Swimming laps, that'd be more aerobic. That'd be more of aerobic conditioning, where you're breathing steady. That's more of that's be more of a cardio day, right? Now, if you're doing sprints, that'd be more of a high intensity day. But just swimming laps would be cardio. And swimming is excellent. The only thing it doesn't load gravity onto the system, so the muscles don't get the same, the muscles and bones don't become as strong as when we're trained into gravity, because that mechanotransduction effect. But swimming is a great workout. Yeah.
Just, would you say a rep, or is that 5, 10,
Reps? Oh, sorry.
12?
It can, so repetition is one full range of motion, and if I say like a higher intensity, that means go to a point of fatigue. And you could do that with 3 pounds, but you probably have to do 30 repetitions to get to fatigue. Or you can pick up 12 pounds. You can either do 3 pounds for 30 reps, or you can do 12 pounds for like 7 or 8 reps. But the main thing is getting to a point of
So
fatigue.
it's not a certain number of movements?
No, it's working that muscle to a point of fatigue, because when the muscle works to a point of fatigue, it's depleted available energy. And that is the biggest stimulus for the endocrine response, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you got it.
Do you have I know it's exert, exhale, it's like not breathing correctly a lot of the times in my whole life. Do you have a way to simplify that?
Breathing, and then, and I like that question. The question is about breathing. Breathe, number one. But the main thing generally is exhale as you exert force. Is anytime you're going to push and exert force is an exhale. So inhale, or the other way to look at it is if I'm extending my body, I want to inhale because I'm actually inspiration. And if I'm flexing my body, I want to exhale. So that way, because I'm actually expiration. When the spine bends, expires. When it straightens, we inspire. We breathe in. So that'd be one rule. If you're flexing your spine, exhale. If you're extending your spine, inhale. Otherwise, exhale as you expend the force. Great question, though. Yeah, just like this young lady right here. Sorry.
Mine was about pickleball. There's a lot of sprinting, so do you consider that a high intensity workout?
Yes, I mean, where my pickup, depending on who you're playing against, when you're playing against ranked beginners and you're doing a lot of like chasing around after it, maybe not. But if if you're playing a tournament against people your same level, absolutely. Pickleball is a great high intensity workout. And the only thing about pickleball, what do we need to do if we're gonna do pickleball?
Warm up first.
Warm up our calves. make sure we get those Achilles nice and get them pumped up full of fluid before we go running. There's another personal trainer friend of mine blew out an Achilles last month playing pickleball.
Heard
And-
that before.
What's that?
I've heard so many Achilles.
I'm paranoid about that, so I don't let people do that. Yeah, and then I'll let you go, yeah.
No, I did that, had surgery.
We don't want that.
Do that.
I mean, I've known